morning. I am doing a spiritual radio because I'm watching these YouTube Ask Reddit things and such about God and what people think it is, and so on and so forth. And I feel like I want to delve into this topic again, and it's going to be interesting. Now, God is an interesting topic because he is different to everyone, in that some people view him as a lie generated by some people. Some people view him as the society itself, meaning that the opinion of the people averaged out is God. There are even Islamic branches with that as their belief, that the average opinion of the believers of the holy cities, or in some cases, I believe the entire Islamic community, is the same as God. So that to some, their group is God, group's will is God. To some people, it is an ancestral spirit, the things which have been taught to you and your ancestors in some purified form is God. To some people, God is some alien living on some other planet or black hole or outside the space time as we know it. And the problem with describing or talking about God is that many of these are so different in how they're understood. So, talking about God to a Taoist who believes that God is a reflection of ancestral spirits is completely different than talking to a fundamental, say, Mormon who believes God is Yahweh and Jesus is his physical son who was born 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. Talking, getting those two groups to talk with one another in a way that promotes peace and civility is very hard. Most people believe in God, even the ones that say they don't. They believe in one form of guiding thought for society. So that they believe, for example, that technical growth, scientific growth will create a singularity, and that singularity to somebody from another faith is equal to God. It is like listening to a religious person talk about creating the age of God. It is no different. So I believe the only true thing worth developing in this universe, being religious or not, is to increase the life expectancy, to be allowed to enjoy this gift longer. So I would say, were I to run a religion, that studying is very important. Making scientific research, patents, inventions to help each other is very important. Sometimes you just have to listen to them talk about the problem without offering solutions because they already have a solution in mind. They're just gauging it through you. They're talking to you about a third topic and they already know how they're going to solve the problem, but they're going to spice the conversation in a way that makes it so that they see how others will react to their solution. They don't want you to offer a solution, they want you to basically hear them smart and covertly talk about their solution. So, all in all, I believe that eventually, if we succeed as a species, in that if life for us is worth living, if that is the final conclusion, I believe birth rates will go down as life expectancy increases. And we will get to a point where to increase the number of living humans, we have to basically clone humans. And that will slowly, as we study the process of cloning, lead to a point where we realize that it is healthier for the clone to be the clone of somebody who is long dead than somebody who is long living. So they will find the DNA of those who have gone before, and they will clone them, and eventually the dead through that method will rise again. That is what I believe. I believe the Bible is a metaphor for a technological process. In the beginning, there is just the gray goo, the void. Then there is a point of infinite brightness. And as that expands outwards, some areas start to appear to be darker than the others. And then eventually matter compresses into stars and so on and so forth. It is a metaphor. And they are projecting into future in a time when they could see that 10 generations ago, everybody had 10 kids. This generation, everybody has 7 kids, and everybody lives a little bit longer and a little bit better. And they project that thought into the future and think, like, what when everybody has 1 kid? What happens? And everybody lives forever, or even no kids, and everybody gets everything they want. What happens when these developmental trends reach the singularity? And will such a point be able to look at us like science says the ancestral simulation can? And if so, can it be bargained with? Are there things we can do to make it pleased with us and thus get its boon? It isn't in as much based on the thought of a creator God, but of a march of civilization and humanity to a point of infinite goodness and infinite ability. And if its power truly is infinite, why wouldn't it be able to affect the past? And then codifying things they think affects this entity. And I believe such a process of development towards paradise is our goal. And the book of Revelations talks of what happens when we forget that goal, that nobody can bring it to us. There is no single power that can make us immortal, and it will only lead to war when we do so. So, what happens when we forget to live our lives with our friends and family and start to actually worship? It's like when you have a good idea, but you put it on paper and you realize people will kill each other and the idea will be worth naught. You can, in the closing chapters, say that God said that following this idea, that totally isn't our idea, but is very similar, causes the death of everyone. So, life is life.
400-ish. We as humans don't have to believe in it, other than to keep us sane before we understood the world. But now as a novelist, I just don't get how people can defend their faiths. Taking a philosophy of religions course at anthropology of religions course in college, learning critical thinking skills, seeing all the hate strongly religious people spread. Just thinking is sufficient to lose faith. Religion teaches you not to think about it. For all of my middle school and high school years, I thought I could make up for the sin of being gay by being the best Christian kid ever. All I'd heard was love the sinner, hate the sin, and crap like that. So I thought I might be accepted if I was celibate and avoided the lifestyle. Then I saw how gay people were actually treated by my church and every other church in my town. And I realized that there was nothing I could do. Their homophobia is so strong and unfounded. I couldn't be in the
I think religions should by default make you question. If a religion is taught in a way that makes it impossible for you to question that religion, I'm skeptical, to put it lightly. And when they say one group is evil, they don't really get my faith.
church without hating myself. When I decided to leave, I felt amazing. I haven't looked back. The problem with love the sinner, hate the sin in context of gays is that it implies that being gay can be fixed. It can't and doesn't need to be fixed. Being gay is part of someone's identity. If you hate their sin, you hate them. Being exposed to people that claim to be loving Christians but contradict everything they supposedly believe in with their everyday actions. Thought it was supposed to be a religion of love when it turned out most good Christians I knew were the most hateful, morally unsound individuals. I read both Bibles back to back when I was about 16. Afterwards, I realized all the stories felt like fables and legends I had read growing up. On top of that, realizing that there were multiple translations of the Bible throughout history, so the idea that anybody has the correct version is ridiculous. Also, discovering the actions of the church throughout history, from the Crusades to Mother Teresa. A combination of church people, ridiculous rules within religion, educating myself, and learning critical thinking skills. My father is an ordained minister. There was an elderly guy at my church who stopped attending for a while when I was younger. The dude was suffering from major depression. Everyone there, including his own family, pretty much ignored him. So, my family and I took him in, inviting him over for meals, social gatherings, even taking him back to church when he felt ready. He was really cool, and with both my grandfathers having just died, he took over that role for me. He committed suicide after a year with us. His last words to me were, "I think of you as a grandson, and sometimes my only grandson." Crap hit the fan. The religion treats suicide as a sin, and everyone, my family included, is talking about how much of a coward he was and how he's not going to paradise. I kept my mouth shut, but that did it for me. If there was a God, I couldn't imagine him in such a place. You know, suicide equates going to heck is fricked up when Dante from Inferno even says that those who took their own lives don't deserve heck. My sister died when she was 2 months old. She was born with Edwards syndrome, and everyone knew that there wasn't an expectation of her living past her first year. I was 7 when she died, and my parents told me that she died because God wanted her to be with him in heaven. At first it made sense to me and I was at peace with it, but as I grew older I realized that my sister had been in pain the few months she was alive. My parents turned to their faith and that helped them, but I couldn't believe in a God that made a 2-month-old baby suffer just so she could go to heaven. When the pastor I'd known for my entire life refused to answer certain questions or told me I wasn't old enough, I was in high school, to know some things. I quit going to church a few years later and really stopped believing in God about 3 years ago when I had a miscarriage. My mother said, when we told her I was pregnant, that it was God's blessing. And when we told her about the miscarriage, God's just testing you. WTF. Mom, I broke so hard. I seriously almost ended up in a hospital psych ward on a 72-hour hold. Except they didn't really think I was that much of a danger to myself, because clearly, sitting on the kitchen floor, sobbing hysterically, with a knife to my wrist isn't dangerous to anybody, and they didn't have a bed. So they sent me home with a dose of Ativan in my system, a sample pack of antidepressant, and the suggestion to call a therapist. I did, and I saw her exactly twice just so I could get a prescription for antidepressants. I struggled, for months, to pick myself up off the ground, and not once, not even for a moment, did I feel any sort of divine presence in my life. I figured God, if he ever existed at all, had said screw you, you're not worth it, and I was going to give him the mental finger. I didn't need that kind of crap in my life. I am so sorry you went through that with no support. I hope things are better now.
I keep thinking of the storyline
Both
of Dogma.
of my parents are
story.
PKs. I spent my entire life devoted to my church. I played on the basketball team, started singing in the choir in preschool. I was on the board, spent my summers up at camp as a camper or staff, never missed a Sunday morning or a Sunday night, or a Wednesday or a Tuesday for that matter. From preschool until I was 21 years old, I showed up multiple times a week. When I was 21 and moved to another state for med school, I found a church there, and I showed up. Then, I had a child. At 11 weeks old, she died. I showed up my entire freaking life for something that couldn't show up for me the one freaking time I needed it. I carried my daughter, birthed her, held her in my arms every day, all the while praising a God that took her from me. Frick that. Being bullied as a small child while adults stood by and said they didn't want to step in and defend the family in case they stopped attending church. I didn't remember any of this until I was in my 20s, but I'd already started distancing myself from the church before then. It was never one thing. It was a lot of little things. I still find the idea of God comforting. It's humans that are messed up. Messed up humans seems to be the majority of why people leave religion. In this thread at least. I'm sorry you were bullied. You didn't deserve to be treated that way. I realized everything was just a front. My grandmother was the most religious person I knew. Went to church at 7 a.m. every single day and was one of the rudest people I had ever known. Grew up in a small, rural, God-fearing town and I had only encountered one gay person in high school and I hated the guy. He was a shat, not because he was gay but he was a shat. Moved to a big city for college. Moved in with my grandma. And suddenly so many gay people and they were the nicest people I had ever met. I had a gay man as a coach for my speech and debate team and the guy walked 4 miles in downtown Portland to make me a visual aid for a speech I had been selected to a state competition for to give me a leg up. I did up act such an act of kindness. I didn't hate gay people. Just didn't understand it since I had zero exposure and the only exposure I had was negative. If anyone could hate these people for who they are, I wanted no part of that. Flat out refused church from then on. Broke some family ties due to it, but I didn't need that crap anymore. Funny story to end this with. My grandmother got really sick towards the end. Stopped going to church and seeing her friends and she became so nice and caring I was completely thrown off. In 6 months she went from hating gays and a die-hard Republican to watching MSNBC and complaining about how gays can't get married. 2005 for reference in CA. One of her lifelong neighbors I have known since my birth went to the same church every day and I honestly don't remember life before him and his wife. Was at all my birthday etc. Ran into them at a grocery store and they were yelling at a lady buying groceries with food stamps demanding that she thank everyone in the store for paying for her. I can't honestly say I was ever religious, but it's things like this that remind me why I'm not. Ex-Jehovah's Witness here. My brother is special needs. He was seriously ill in intensive care. Didn't know he would pull through. Our broke down and we had little money, so what money we had we spent on taxes so we could be with him. Even though that meant having little to eat. Our person visited. Offered to give us a lift or even called to ask how he was. But they all have a crap about someone's husband who was a non-believer, inundating him with lists, gifts, even cooking for him. So much so he wrote a massive thank you card for the whole congregation because he couldn't get over how nice everyone was. This so-called congregation didn't think it was right that my mum took my brother out of residential care even though he was being abused because it meant she couldn't spend as much time at the meetings or on the ministry. So any troubles we had with him meant we were in our own. I just couldn't be in the same room as them, let alone serve their God after that. Frick you Jehovah Witnesses, you self-righteous frigs. The very modern and all-inclusive church we were attending at the time, turning on my brother when he came out was the final straw, but just coming of age made me question all of it and I realized I just can't believe in a magical sky fairy. Started high school in a bigger town. Combination of philosophy class, seeing different lives than church one. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made, and if my quest is one for truth, then I must willingly follow that quest. Have great respect for and still aim to live my life with a good social rules from the New Testament. I respect both new and old wisdom. It was a slow wearing away for me. To borrow Neil deGrasse Tyson's expression, I had faith in the God of the gaps, and those gaps just kept getting smaller and smaller for me. Being taught the Bible is the word of God, it made me question things after finding out the Bible had been edited by people. Or when you are told that the Eucharist is literally the body of Christ when it is clearly not flesh and blood. So God diminished somewhat for me.
You
For
should
a
serve
while I was
bacon
content with
as the
faith in a
Eucharist.
non-literal Bible.
The
I
body
really
of
loved
Christ.
science and was learning to think critically. I began to realize that I had more faith in science as a process. It could be tested, and it wasn't absolute. Also, the explanations for creation and life are simpler, following Occam's razor. So, maybe God did create everything, and it seemed more likely to have arisen naturally. God, for me, had diminished to maybe God made the Big Bang and everything went from there.
Yeah.
I began learning about other world religions, and how convinced every culture is that they have the one true faith. And I ran across the philosophical argument that God cannot be both omnipotent and magnanimous, or else he would not allow the suffering we see in this world to occur. Now I consider myself agnostic atheist. There's no way to prove that there isn't a God, but I don't believe that there is one. This is the closest to my own story, right down to your philosophical example.
I think the closest example of godlike things I can think of that might be taken to be God but isn't is the fact that, as far as I'm aware of, I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware of, all life that we see as life has two or more, meaning DNA. So when you are awake and making decisions, there is the other half of the DNA, which is reacting to you. So there is one aspect of your totality, which is the one you experience. And there is another aspect of your totality, the one that makes the stuff you experience. And realizing that the guy who makes this stuff can be conned is perhaps the wrong word, but can be persuaded to give you anything out there at any time to your inside world is pretty divine. Meaning that if you want an apple, you can turn on that persona. It drives its car to the store, buys an apple, drives back, and you wake up with an apple in your hand. And in your view, no time has passed. And this ability of the other self extends all the way to the infinite, in that you can ask it to generate a black hole next to you, and it will generate a black hole next to you. You can ask it to do anything, it is completely omnipotent, but it isn't completely benevolent. In fact, it is very, very resistant and very, very undesirous of influencing humans. It is the same as to you living every dream that you have as being awake. You dream and have dreams because it is pleasant to be unconscious in that sense. And for this persona, it is pleasant to believe it is a human. If it uses those powers and gives you powers, you will no longer be a pleasant thing to live in. You will have stress because now you have magic powers, thus, you have the need to use those magic powers. You use what you have. So it is very hesitant, very resistant to you influencing it. But if you get just the right situation, you can have a secondary persona in your body that is omnipotent while you are not. But that is perhaps more to do with how life is formed than it has to do with actual God. Because if you wish, your mind can make you fall asleep and wake up in a new world, and you can live your entire life in that world and then wake up just where you went to bed. That is what your mind can do. So if you are to be in a position of dying, your brain can make you literally live another life before you die, and then another, and then another. So this creates the question of, is the past of death that we see literally the surface of a black hole that keeps turning the mass more red, but never completely disappearing from your perspective? Does that make sense? I do not believe that it is appropriate to look at the creator spirit as if it's God. God denotes complete benevolence and complete omnipotence, and I do not believe that the starting thought or motion that the universe felt when creating the Big Bang denotes a being of omnipotence and benevolence. It denotes a creature that is still learning, it seems. The universe can be described as a learning experiment, in my opinion. God is perhaps omnipotent, but due to not having lived every life everywhere and not knowing instinctively how that life will react, it is not able to make a paradise for everyone. It can only make a small paradise, which it is building to be larger, and that is the nature of how gods evolve. They have a paradise they can build, but that paradise might only be large enough for one person or one family. But at some point, the spirit makes a decision to make that paradise as large as it can be. And the moment they make that decision is the moment they become God, in my opinion. We just happen to be in Christianity worshiping one iteration of one Middle Eastern God. But in Catholicism, you can kind of view every saint as God, and the tradition of not calling them gods as fairly relevant. Theoretically, I believe we will evolve into a state, if we do not die, that will resurrect the dead. But to get there, we have to go through so many permutations of what our adult mind thinks are impossible that we age and become unable to interact with society after a certain point, but we do continue. Then society, at some point in the far future, creates the tendrils through which we learn to interact with it again. But we do not experience death. We experience a process that can be described as fever. You feel ill and pain. And at some point, it makes you unconscious, but the pain continues to build in severity for basically eternity. Then, as I said, at some point, the future creates a path into the past to correct those pains, like old diseases. And when the pain ends, you wake up in this fluffy field and look around and you're like, huh, I could interact with society again. The human spirit would greatly benefit from not being so asleep, to focus on things it can do and to understand that theoretically it can do anything. And incidentally, being one who has seen and been worshipped, I consider worship to be an act of hostility. I consider it. So if you worship God, you are hostile to God, in my opinion. You are not acting according to the plan. The plan is for you to be you, no matter what that means. And the plan is for others to build a method around you through which your let's say, perversion or individuality can be used by the community for the benefit of the community. So that one by one, the things we consider to be impossible because it would hurt others, the others build a system to make it non-hurting. And then we can all partake in it. And then we switch to the next question, eventually eliminating the process of pain from the spirit, making the community more alive.
I'm Dave Taylor, rock and roll. Good people, good times. Right on. Rock and roll. Kim Smith. It's fun to say Kim Smith. Yeah, Kim Smith will take you to the mountain. Rock and roll.
You have technicians here making noise. No one is a musician. They're not artists because nobody can play the guitar.
I have seen the word gay transform in such a fundamental, deep level throughout my life that it's gone from meaning people who exclusively have sex with those of their same gender to people who basically have any kind of soft attribute in their spirit. If you don't consider women to be your inferior and you're a man and you want to converse with them occasionally about important topics, for example, you are considered gay. If you want to have a family, you're considered gay. If you don't want to beat up your children, you're considered gay. I am seeing roughly what I expected to see. Roughly. Where the group of people who used to be the school bullies and who used to target the people who were disliked have started to target large groups of people who were not hostile to them, but were not them, and are calling them disease because they are causing them to pause and think. And I'm seeing the people who are called a disease respond to it by distancing themselves from society. Being like, okay, in your society, I'm a disease. Can I get away from your society and live in the forest over here without you attacking me? And it seems no. So I'm seeing one persona try to lift itself into the paradise state by eliminating all other personas. And I'm seeing most personas try to do it. Denotes war. This was very clear when I watched the voice in the dark schizophrenic thing that I made, the YouTube video, which I believe is blocked at the moment, but I can watch it as the author. And the person described their voice experience, and I realized it is very, very, very similar to what I do in my subconscious to people that I don't like. So they were describing their voices as my thought pattern, basically. It occurred to me, just like I knew, that I am somebody's voice and somebody is my voice. Neither of them are wrong or right. They are just different. And the mind is supposed to be able to filter them out into concepts of otherhood. But the more society grows interlinked, the more difficult this process is, and errors appear. Just like with any other probability, you may have the error of cancer genes, for example. These people might have the error of taking other people's opinions, for example, too strongly or too weakly. If you never listen to someone else, your schizophrenia might be the world convincing you to listen to others, for example. If you like me, in that you try to influence the world towards good through massive means, schizophrenia might be the people who you've influenced talking to you like you're their god. That might be your schizophrenia. It depends on how you interact with the world. When you have an impulse that you don't process or can't process, in that, for example, you can't process the signal of what somebody else's government thinks of you. It is impossible for you to know without checking. And if you don't want to process it, it might be a trauma, but there are signals that you physically can't process, you don't have the information for, but you're still concerned about it. You might go a little insane because it is a life form in your field that you can't understand. And the more you spend time thinking about what they're like, the more likely you are to create a false image. So for many people with schizophrenia, the most important thing would be to bring the object of their paranoia to them. But not necessarily, it might be. If you have a hallucination, if you have a hallucination of some country somewhere following you, it would be most important to see, can that hallucination be tested? Can we create a machine or situation where such a hallucination can be objectively tested? If it can't, then we just shrug and say it's impossible for us to know. But if it can, then it should be done so. In my case, I would take an fMRI, which is a functional magnetic resonance imaging, which is taken off the brain. And when you, for example, talk or imagine or do anything, different sections of your brain light up. So we can see, if you watch, for example, a foreign movie without subtitles, how does your brain interact? If we make you watch gibberish, how does your brain interact? If we make you read text, how does your brain interact? And doing all these things and then putting you into the channeled state while seeing how your brain reacts, making you watch Norse map and seeing how your brain reacts. Do you see an actual conversation, or does your imagination light up? What happens? And looking at them very carefully and doing the necessary testing and advanced thought into your field might be possible to show where you are hallucinating. What specific area of the brain lights up when you are doing your hallucination? And if we can see what other activities light that brain section up and what shut it down, we can explain these to you and make sure that you understand that we can see when your brain hallucinates. So when you are hooked with this machine and you think of your worldview and write it down, for example, as you think, we can show you a video of your brain at the very same time and seeing which parts of your worldview correspond with what you'd consider reality and where you are in a mess of your brain making things happen for you. We can literally see that happen. That would be very interesting. you could pinpoint what lies feel like. So when your mind is doing things that you do not like or you consider improper, you can feel if they are improper or if it's your panic. You can literally feel it in your brain. Way getting groups of people for fMRIs seems very beneficial. Doing random fMRI work to see how different minds work would be very beneficial. I do know that there has been a case of a fMRI scan on a normal versus psychopathic brain, and we have noted that the psychopathic brain is indeed, in how it processes electrical signals, distinctly different from the neurotypical brain, to such an extent that sometimes these tests are not believed by the scientists who read them. Says things different. I would describe the psychopathic brain as a brain that is unable to sleep. Describe it as that. It takes a sleep-like phenomena to believe that others matter. In the God state of awakened knowledge, it is possible to go your entire life without believing that other people ever matter, because you are in the awakened brain God state. Others are artifacts to you. If they do something harmful to you or something to prevent you from doing something, they are considered artifacts that don't work, not individuals you have wronged, but the process is taken internal, in that you try to figure out how you acted wrong, that this life doesn't act right towards you. That is the psychopathic brain. You try to change something in your field to change the other without considering them as recompense, in that you have wronged the other and you need to change, but rather like physical aberrations in your field. It is not giving me perfect pleasure, therefore I must change it.
Expense management can become a real hassle. That's where we come in. Eurocard is like a helping hand in your business, so you can do what you do best.
It's hard to whistle to this song whilst the camera is on. You can feel how tense I am. So tense. Shouldn't be afraid. I used to be able to, when I'm not bothered, to hit every single note that you play with the same intent. It's the audience.
haluaa parantamaan kustannuksia. He eivät tiedä, paljonko he maksavat korkoa luotollistaan. Korko saattaa jopa nousta, jos et seuraa sovittua maksusta.
Turvaa rakkaittesi tulevaisuus henkivakuutuksella. Järjestöjäsenenä saat henkivakuutuksen edullisesti osoitteesta if.fi/henkivakuutus.
She works at night by the water. She's gone astray, so far away from my father's daughter. She just wants a life for a baby. All on her own, no one will come. She's got to save him. She tells him, ooh, love, no one's ever gonna hurt you, love. I'm gonna give you all of my love. Nobody matters like you. She tells him, your life ain't gonna be nothing like my life. You're gonna grow and have a good life. I'm gonna do what I've got to do. So rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Somebody's got you, rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Rock-a-bye, rock-a-bye, rock-a-bye. Rock-a-bye. Single mom, what you doing out there? Facing the hard life without no fear. Just so you know that you really care. Cause any obstacle come, you are prepared. No, mama, you never shed tear. Cause you happy settings year after year. And you give the your love beyond compare. You find the school fee and never spare. When the pops disappear and the wrong bar can't find him nowhere. Suddenly workflow heavily, you know, sin not stop. No time for your chair. Now she got a 6-year-old trying to keep him warm, trying to keep all the cold. When he looks in her eyes, you don't know he say what she says. Ooh, love, no one's ever gonna hurt you, love. I'm gonna give you all of my love. Nobody matters like you. So rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. Oh, baby, don't you cry. Somebody's got you, rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Rock-a-bye. Whoa, rock-a-bye. Rock-a-bye, rock-a-bye. Rock-a-bye, don't bother crying. just draw your eye. She tells him, ooh, love, no one's ever gonna hurt you, love. I'm gonna give you all of my love. Nobody matters like you. She tells him, your life ain't gonna be nothing like my life. You're gonna grow and have a good life. I'm gonna do what I've got to do. So rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Somebody's got you, rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Rock-a-bye, don't want to cry. Lift up your head, lift it up to the sky, yo. Rock-a-bye, don't want to cry. Angels around you, just do your eye. Rock-a-bye, don't want to cry. Lift up your head, lift it up to the sky, yo. Rock-a-bye, don't want to cry. Angels around you, just do your eye.
experience personalized Philips Hue smart lighting throughout your day. Whether relaxing after a day of work or playfully lighting a dinner party.
Okay, I'm gonna go buy some more energy drink. I drank the only can I had, and I think the topic of religion has been pretty well covered this morning. So yeah, take thou care.